When you think of muscle cars, it may conjure up images of older cars with big engines, and you're certainly not wrong for thinking that way. Some dictionaries may define muscle cars as an American-made two-door coupe with powerful engines designed for high-performance driving. There's no doubt that Americans have had a fascination with raw power in automobiles, but they aren't the only ones. There are multiple muscle cars that were sold in other countries, and many Americans don't even know about them. In this video, we will have a look back at some of the U.S. muscle cars never sold in America. The Chevy Opala was manufactured by Chevrolet of Brazil, and it was sold throughout South America from 1969 to 1992. It was a pretty mean-looking car that fits the look of a classic muscle car. The Opala became the car of choice for many taxi companies as well as the Brazilian Federal Police due to its reliability and its ease of maintenance. In its heyday, the 1976 Opala Supersport was one of the fastest cars in Brazil with a 0 to 60 mph time of 11 seconds and could reach a top speed of 112 miles per hour. The car had General Motors' 250 cubic inch inline 6-cylinder engine installed in it, and it had 148 horsepower with a 4-speed manual transmission. Chevy power was alive and well in Brazil. When you hear the name GTX, you often associate it with Plymouth here in America, but Dodge also had a GTX model that was manufactured in Argentina. The production of the Dodge GTX lasted from 1970 to 1979. In the beginning, the GTX was equipped with an inline 6-cylinder engine and was later upgraded to a 318 cubic inch V8, which would end up becoming distinctive for this model. The GTX was one of the very few muscle cars that was manufactured in Argentina. It had 188 horsepower, and when it was paired with a 4-speed manual transmission, it could go 0 to 60 in 7.9 seconds with a top speed of 117 miles per hour. The Chrysler Valiant Charger was a two-door hardtop coupe that was introduced in 1971 and primarily sold in Australia. There were several models, but the RT version saw only 149 units that were made. It came with a 4.3-liter Hemi 6-cylinder engine that was capable of generating 302 horsepower, and it had a 3-speed transmission. This car was one of the most powerful 6-cylinder engines of its time. It only needed 6.1 seconds to reach 0 to 60 miles per hour and 14.5 seconds for a quarter mile. The top speed on this vehicle was 119 miles per hour. The car was similar to the U.S. Chrysler body platform, but it came with a wider rear axle as well as broader fenders. Holden was an Australian car manufacturer, but it was a subsidiary of General Motors. The Holden HX Sandman was first released in 1974, and it was really hoping to grab a hold of the surfing culture that was happening at that time. It was fitted with a 160 horsepower 4.2-liter V8 engine, and when it had the 4-speed manual transmission, it could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 12 seconds with a top speed of 120 miles per hour. The car remained in production until 1980, and it was sold as a sports coupe utility car. It became pretty popular with younger folks who referred to them as shaggin' wagons. The Opel Diplomat was more of a luxury car in the beginning when it came out in 1964, but it was also offered with a little more power until they stopped making them in 1977. This German-made car could be purchased with a 4.6-liter or a 5.4-liter Chevrolet V8 engine that was paired with a 2-speed Powerglide automatic transmission. It had 230 horsepower, which could take it to a top speed of 124 miles per hour and a 0 to 60 time in 8.6 seconds. There were only 347 units of the V8 Opel Diplomat made. The Holden Monaro was another cool muscle car that was manufactured in Australia from 1968 to 1977. It was heavily influenced by the Ford Mustang and Chevrolet Camaro, but it was also entirely unique. The GTS version came equipped with either a 307 cubic inch V8 engine or a 327 cubic inch small block Chevrolet V8, which had 275 horsepower. It had a 0 to 60 time in 7.6 seconds with a top speed of 127 miles per hour. Buyers had a choice between 3 transmissions: a 3-speed Trimatic automatic, a 3-speed TH350 automatic, or a 4-speed manual. The Chevrolet Forenza Can-Am was a tiny performance-based muscle car. It had a British chassis and was powered by an American V8 that was born in South Africa. This car was first introduced in 1971 and was on the market until 1975. The car was rear-wheel drive, and it came with a 4.9-liter V8 engine and a 4-speed manual transmission that had 290 horsepower. It was amazingly fast for its time, with a top speed of 140 miles per hour and a 0 to 60 miles per hour time of 5.4 seconds. The car also featured a sporty interior with a 3-spoke steering wheel. When the Ford Capri Piranha was first released in 1969, it had a 3.0-liter Essex V6 in it, and there were less than 20 units made. The following year's model came with an upgraded 5.0-liter V8 Windsor engine and had 2 transmissions to choose from: a 3-speed C4 automatic transmission or a 4-speed Ford top-loader transmission. This car was sold in South Africa, and it boasted a 0 to 60 miles per hour time in just 6.1 seconds with a top speed of 142 miles per hour with its 281 horsepower. By the time the car had ceased production in 1973, there were less than 500 units that had been made. The Ford XY Falcon GT-HO Phase 3 was another great Australian muscle car. When it was first released in 1971, it was considered the fastest four-door car in the world. It had a 300 horsepower, 351 cubic inch Cleveland V8 engine as a power source, but there were some journalists at the time that claimed it actually had 380 horsepower. Whatever the horsepower was, it could reach 0 to 60 miles per hour in 6.4 seconds and had a top speed of 142 miles per hour. In 1978, Ford was getting ready to introduce a new body style for its famous Falcon. The two-door coupe was going out of production in order to make way for a sedan or station wagon. The problem was, Ford had 400 coupe body shells that had become obsolete. They decided to turn the leftover bodies into a special version called the Ford Shelby Cobra, and it became quite popular in Australia. Buyers had the choice between a 5.0 or a 5.8 V8 engine with an automatic or manual transmission. The Chevrolet Chev Supersport was really a Holden Monaro GTS, but this Australian-built car was exported to South Africa to be sold in Chevrolet dealerships. The front grille was different from the GTS, but the South African Supersport had 4 headlights. The car came in a 308 V8, but most customers chose the 350 V8 with 300 horsepower. It had a top speed of 130 miles per hour and could go 0 to 60 in 7.5 seconds. A high number of these cars were produced, but most were crashed or exported back to Australia. The Chevrolet 400 was introduced in Argentina in 1962, and it was really the Chevy 2 or Nova here in the US. In 1967, a Supersport model became available, which had a more powerful 250 cubic inch engine with 155 horsepower. Not the fastest car on earth, but nonetheless it was still stylish and sporty for a four-door car in Argentina. The US is home to some of the most iconic muscle cars of all time, but there was also quite a few amazing muscle cars that never made it to American soil. For many people in other countries, these were the muscle cars of their time, and they are still very much loved today. If you could have one of these muscle cars, which one would it be? Let us know in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching.